I still remember the smell of burnt coffee before sunrise. Not strong, not fresh, just there. The kind that settled into your clothes and stayed with you all day, quietly reminding you that you'd arrived early for someone else's life. I came in before the city woke up, when the streets were empty and the building felt honest. No voices, no posturing, just fluorescent lights and floors that hadn't learned how to lie yet. I wasn't an executive, I wasn't even background noise. I unlocked doors, emptied trash, wiped fingerprints from glass tables so the people who mattered could pretend order had always existed. For 3 years, that building paid my rent and slowly took everything else. I knew the place better than anyone inside it. Not because I was important, but because I was invisible long enough to notice patterns. Who slammed doors after phone calls, who smiled in meetings and dismantled people in follow-up emails, who cheated on spouses, who cheated on numbers. You learn things when no one thinks you're listening. Marcus Hale didn't fit most patterns. CO media favorite, the kind of man business magazines described as relentlessly ethical. He moved through rooms like gravity adjusted itself for him. Not arrogance, something quieter, assumption. He never looked down, not once, not at assistants, not at security, not at me. I used to be someone else before the uniform, before mornings that started too early and nights that never fully ended. I had a startup, a real one, not a fantasy, not a pitch deck pretending to be a company. It didn't fail because the idea was weak. It failed because someone larger decided it shouldn't exist. Rent doesn't care about principles. My wife was pregnant. Bills stacked faster than rejection emails. So when Marcus's company advertised growth opportunities, I took the job already knowing who those opportunities were meant for. Not people like me. I worked anyway, quietly, carefully. I fixed problems before they became visible, stayed late without being asked, learned how the building breathed after hours. Eventually, people stopped noticing me. That's when they started trusting me. Laptops left open, printers abandoned mid-job, conference rooms emptied too quickly, whiteboards still full. That's how I found the document. It was late, executive floor, a printer blinking like it was waiting for someone to care. I almost tossed the pages into Lost and found without reading them. Then I saw the name, my company. The same startup Marcus had dismissed on stage months earlier, called it naive, unsustainable, a learning experience for first-time founders. The same company that collapsed weeks after a key investor suddenly walked away. This document wasn't dismissive. It was meticulous. Market analysis, technical breakdowns, growth projections we'd never shared publicly, observations that only came from watching closely. At the bottom, one line sat alone: acquire talent quietly, kill brand publicly. The room felt smaller after that. I stopped believing in coincidence. I started paying attention. I watched meetings from the edges of rooms while pretending to clean, listened when executives spoke freely around me. Confident silence meant ignorance. My investor hadn't changed his mind. He'd been cornered. Promised future access if he walked away from me. Threatened with isolation if he didn't. My company wasn't outperformed, it was removed. At home, my wife noticed the shift before I said anything. I spoke less, thought more. Anger didn't show it focused. I told her work was stressful. That explanation required fewer words. What I felt wasn't rage, it was clarity. People reveal themselves completely when they think you don't matter, and they leave doors open they don't even know exist. I started documenting things, nothing dramatic, just careful. Screenshots from unattended screens, photos of whiteboards before erasure, audio captured accidentally when meetings ran long and rooms stayed unlocked, everything backed up again, then somewhere unreachable. I didn't rush. Rushed revenge makes noise. Months passed. My son was born. Marcus rang the opening bell at the stock exchange. His company surged, and every night I kept cleaning. Until one call ended any remaining doubt. I was emptying the trash in Marcus's office when his laptop chimed. An incoming video call. I should have looked away. I didn't. The investor appeared on screen, the same one who'd erased my company. They laughed, talked casually about necessary casualties, about founders being ideas, not people. Marcus leaned back in his chair, relaxed. He was useful without knowing it, he said. That's the best kind. That sentence didn't make me angry. It simplified things. That night, I stood in the doorway of our apartment watching my son sleep, and I made a decision not to expose Marcus quickly, not to confront him publicly. I didn't want him fired. I wanted him dismantled. Slowly, legally, in full view. Marcus never noticed when I quietly accepted a temporary promotion he didn't remember approving. Operations assistant, night access, expanded clearance, more visibility, more trust, more leverage. He thought the story was over. It hadn't started yet. I learned quickly that access doesn't arrive all at once. It expands in inches. A badge that opens one more door, a password that works a little longer than it should, a calendar invite no one bothers to question. Operations assistant sounded harmless, temporary, invisible. That was the point. Night access changed everything. The building behaved differently after dark. No performances, no urgency, just systems running on habit. People left things behind when they assumed no one was watching. I watched. I learned which departments stayed late during earnings season, which executives printed sensitive material instead of trusting screens, which assistants reused passwords because convenience always beat policy. Most importantly, I learned how Marcus's empire actually functioned. Publicly, it was clean, efficient, disciplined. Internally, it was layered shortcuts stacked on top of unchallenged authority. Everyone trusted the system because they trusted Marcus, and they trusted Marcus because no one had ever been allowed to question him. That kind of trust ages poorly. I didn't collect secrets for revenge. I collected them for context. Patterns, confirmation. I wanted to know if my story was an exception or a habit. It was a habit. Founders quietly pushed out after their ideas were absorbed. Partners diluted until they disappeared. Regulatory gray areas walked carefully enough to avoid headlines, but aggressively enough to generate returns. Nothing illegal, not clean either, just deniable. Weeks turned into months. My promotion became permanent without anyone formally telling me. Payroll adjusted, access expanded again. I stopped wearing the uniform and started wearing neutral clothes that didn't belong to any department. People assumed I was supposed to be there. That's the most dangerous assumption a company can make. I began mapping internal dependencies. Who approved what? Who deferred to whom? Where decisions stalled without Marcus's signature. He wasn't just the face, he was the bottleneck. Every system had been optimized to make him indispensable. That meant one thing. If Marcus hesitated, everything did. I wasn't interested in exposing scandals. Scandals blow over. I wanted pressure. The kind that forces mistakes. The kind that makes confident people rush decisions they normally wouldn't. The opportunity came disguised as a routine audit. An external compliance review triggered by a minor reporting inconsistency. Nothing public, nothing alarming. Just enough to make executives nervous. Marcus delegated it downward. He always did. Oversight bored him. That was the opening. I didn't fabricate anything I didn't need to. I simply organized existing information in ways no one had bothered to see before. Timelines aligned, emails connected. Assumptions collapsed under sequencing. What looked like isolated decisions started resembling a pattern. I didn't submit it anonymously. I submitted it properly, through channels, with documentation. Calm language, no accusations, just questions. The audit slowed operations. Meetings multiplied. Legal got involved earlier than planned. Marcus noticed, but not enough to intervene directly. He still believed the system protected him. At home, life stayed ordinary. That was important. I changed diapers, paid bills, fixed things around the apartment. My wife asked fewer questions as long as I came home on time and didn't bring work with me. I kept my promise. Pressure builds quietly before it makes sound. The first crack appeared during an earnings call rehearsal. I wasn't in the room. I didn't need to be. The walls were thin. Voices weren't. Marcus interrupted someone mid-sentence, corrected a number, then corrected it again. He wasn't wrong, he just wasn't sure. That was new. The second crack came from legal, a request for clarification, then another, then a meeting. Marcus didn't attend personally for the first time in years. Delegation looks confident until it doesn't. I stayed where I was, observing, adjusting, making sure nothing pointed back to me. Revenge fails when it becomes personal too early. Then Marcus made a mistake. He rushed. A quiet internal restructuring meant to limit exposure, a decision made quickly. Too quickly. It shifted responsibilities in a way that looked efficient on paper, but disrupted an internal safeguard no one remembered existed, except me. The safeguard triggered a mandatory disclosure requirement. Minor, technical, but unavoidable. Legal flagged it, finance panicked. Marcus called an emergency meeting. For the first time, his confidence sounded rehearsed. I wasn't in the room when he spoke, but I was close enough to hear the pause before his answer. The hesitation he couldn't hide. Systems don't collapse dramatically. They misfire first. By the time Marcus realized something was wrong, he was already reacting instead of directing. The building felt different, tighter, quieter. Conversations stopped when he walked by, not out of respect, but recalculation. At night, I reviewed everything again, every file, every time. Marcus changed before the headlines ever did. Not dramatically. Not in ways most people would notice. Just enough for those who watched patterns instead of personalities. He started arriving earlier, staying later, asking questions that didn't need asking. Rechecking work that had already passed through 3 layers of approval. Control looks like diligence when you don't know what fear sounds like yet. The building adjusted around him. Meetings ran longer. Emails multiplied. Decision loops tightened. People stopped improvising and started waiting. E-waiting is expensive. I didn't push anymore. That phase was over. Now I let inertia do the work. Systems under pressure reveal where they were never reinforced. Legal wanted distance, finance wanted certainty, operations wanted direction. Marcus provided pieces of each, but never enough to satisfy all three at once. Every compromise created another dependency. Every dependency created another delay. Externally, everything still looked perfect. The stock held steady. Press releases stayed optimistic. Marcus gave interviews about navigating complexity and embracing accountability. He smiled the same way he always had, but his timing was off, just slightly. That's what people miss. Confidence isn't volume, it's rhythm. Internally, the audit expanded, quietly. What began as a narrow review now included adjacent decisions, then adjacent teams, then adjacent years. No one announced it. It simply became the safest interpretation. No one wanted to be the person who argued for less scrutiny. I watched executives hedge in real time. Emails grew longer. Language softened. Phrases like, "to my understanding and subject to confirmation," appeared where certainty used to live. Marcus noticed. He called a private strategy session with a small group he trusted. I wasn't invited. I didn't need to be. One of them printed the agenda. People always do. The agenda wasn't aggressive. That was the problem. It focused on containment, not resolution, on managing perception, not fixing cause. Marcus still believed this was about noise. It wasn't. The board requested a briefing. Informal, preemptive. Marcus prepared it himself. He always did when things mattered. The night before, he stayed late. So did I. I watched from the far end of the floor as lights stayed on in his office past midnight. I didn't approach. I didn't listen. I didn't interfere. I let him work. The briefing didn't go the way he expected. Board members didn't accuse. They asked careful questions about timelines, about oversight, about why certain decisions were centralized when governance guidelines recommended distribution. Marcus answered them, mostly, but answers create follow-ups when they're too polished. The board asked for documentation. That request landed differently. After that, nothing moved quickly anymore. Approvals stalled. Initiatives paused. Executives started protecting themselves instead of aligning. Every email copied more people than necessary. Every decision looked for cover. Marcus still signed off on everything. But now signatures carried weight instead of authority. He started losing allies before he noticed they were gone. At home, I felt the shift too, not emotionally, structurally. My days became predictable again. Predictability is dangerous when someone else is losing it. One night, I ran into Marcus in the elevator, just the two of us. He looked tired, not worn, focused tired, the kind that comes from holding too many variables in your head at once. He nodded politely, nothing more. Then he asked, "Long night?" I answered honestly, "Same as usual." The doors opened. He stepped out. That was it. He never recognized me. That mattered more than he would ever know. The next escalation didn't come from me. It came from a regulator, routine request, narrow scope. Triggered automatically by the disclosure Marcus had rushed through weeks earlier. Automatic processes don't negotiate. Legal flagged the risk. The board asked questions again. This time, the tone shifted. Less curiosity, more alignment. Alignment doesn't happen unless someone has already decided something privately. Marcus was no longer shaping the conversation. He was responding to it. Internally, restructuring plans froze. Externally, a journalist called the press office asking about historical acquisitions. The question wasn't hostile, it was informed. That's when Marcus panicked, not visibly. Strategically, he tried to move fast again, a quiet attempt to consolidate authority, to bring decision-making closer to him. The move was framed as efficiency. It wasn't approved. The board declined, politely, temporarily, but the message was clear. Marcus wasn't indispensable anymore. I stood in the operations room that night, watching dashboards refresh. Everything still worked, but the margins were thinner. The buffer's gone. One more misstep would trigger processes no one could stop. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt distance. Revenge isn't emotional when it's done right. It's mechanical. You step back and let gravity finish the job. Marcus still believed he could recover, that he could outwork it, outmaneuver it. He didn't realize the window for recovery had already closed, because the final piece wasn't pressure. It was exposure, and it was already moving, independent of me. I started documenting everything, slowly, deliberately, like I was piecing together a puzzle Vincent had left for me without knowing I could see it. Each mortgage, each hidden transfer, every lease and line of credit, I traced it all, jotting notes in the margins, highlighting patterns that nobody else would notice, calls to vendors, old invoices, corporate memos. They became evidence, yes, but also threads in a web that finally made sense. Between the stacks of papers and glowing screens, I allowed myself small pauses, a sip of coffee, a deep breath. The quiet hum of the apartment. Tyler would wander in sometimes, asking a question about school or lunch, and I would glance at him, offering a calm smile, careful to keep the storm outside these walls invisible. Then there was Nina, arriving just when I needed someone who could translate numbers into strategy, law into leverage. She didn't swoop in with dramatic flair. Instead, she sat across the table, scanning pages, asking pointed questions that forced clarity out of chaos. "Every asset has a shadow," she said softly, almost conversationally, and I realized she was speaking my language. Tyler, meanwhile, began noticing subtle inconsistencies, little hints Vincent left in plain sight. A dinner comment that didn't match the receipts, a shrug that seemed too practiced, his mind quietly cataloging what my own eyes had uncovered. Watching him, seeing that spark of recognition in a 15-year-old, reminded me that truth has a way of showing itself to the observant. And as I set each document in place, as I built this invisible fortress of patience and proof, the addendum sat at the center, the liability disclosure, every obligation, every hidden debt meticulously accounted for. It was precise, undeniable, a trap crafted with the calm of someone who knows timing is everything. I leaned back, letting the weight of 3 years settle, not relief, not triumph, just a quiet, measured readiness. The game hadn't ended, it was about to shift. Vincent didn't realize the final moves had already been set. From the outside, he looked composed, calm meetings, carefully curated social media posts, the same effortless smile he had perfected over years. But inside, every step he took triggered delays, obligations, and exposures he couldn't control. Vendors waited, accounts froze, lease payments piled up. Each decision he had once executed with authority now required approvals, signatures, verification. The empire he had built on precision now faltered under the weight of its own dependencies. I watched it unfold from the apartment, Tyler at my side. I didn't call, confront, or gloat. The law, contracts, and strategic patience were doing the work for me. Every oversight Vincent had ever made, every rushed decision, every arrogance now rippled back into his life. He hadn't anticipated patience executed at this level. Timing, observation, and quiet consistency had dismantled him without a single dramatic gesture. Tyler noticed things that I didn't even have to point out. The canceled trips, the unusual quiet of certain weekends, the tension in conversations adults pretend aren't happening. As I explained gently, in ways he could grasp, adults sometimes lie to themselves to protect appearances. That was all he needed. Understanding, awareness, and a sense that control isn't always loud, it's careful, deliberate, invisible, until it's absolute. Vincent's network began to shift. Partners who once flattered him now hesitated. Staff aligned to safeguard themselves. Investments stalled. Social media, once a tool of display, became a series of carefully worded attempts to maintain illusion. Every AL questioned loyalty. Every plan relied on someone else's discretion. And he had no leverage left because the structures I had quietly reinforced were already operating independently. The day the final liability documents were enforced, the world barely noticed. The house he claimed was no longer an asset but a responsibility. Business accounts froze under the weight of legal and financial realities. Credit lines denied. Expenses exceeded available liquidity. Vincent had everything he thought he wanted, and everything he thought was strength had turned into a trap. I didn't celebrate. I brewed coffee. Strong, black. Tyler ran ahead in the apartment, chasing sunlight across the floor. I watched, noting the contrast between the chaos unfolding elsewhere and the calm we maintained here. That was the ultimate victory: freedom, patience rewarded, and control reclaimed. Vincent called once, briefly, professionally. A voicemail only, polite in tone but trembling underneath. He did not ask for restitution or explanation. He didn't need to. The law, the documentation, and 3 years of strategic observation had spoken for me. I deleted the message. There was nothing left to say. Later, walking with Tyler through our small garden, I realized something essential. Revenge isn't loud, it's invisible, it's meticulous, it's the quiet orchestration of consequence over time. The most devastating victories are the ones no one saw coming, executed with patience, precision, and understanding. Vincent's empire collapsed not with fury but with inevitability. I had built something stronger: freedom, safety, and a life we could actually live. And as Tyler ran ahead, laughing, chasing shadows in sunlight, I finally understood the depth of what had been accomplished. Not out of anger, not out of pride, but from quiet clarity, patience, and unwavering control. I took a deep breath, sipped my coffee, and felt it settle. The story was over. We were free.